Kia ora.
Kia ora. Tēnā koe, Mr. Young.
Sir, I'm very pleased to stand in support of this bill that is sponsored by Māori Party MP Tuaroa Flavel, and who is a very positive contributor to the Maori Select Committee. Sir, it was very interesting when we went to Tauranga, a place where I think is full of history. I lived there myself for a number of years, to hear the submissions that came in from the surrounding hapu regarding this bill. And it's such a, I guess, a interesting mix of, a fascinating mix of events that contributed to this dilemma that this bill now is bringing repair and sense of justice to. This bill transfers land in Tauranga and other property from the New Zealand Mission Trust to the Otamataha Trust, so that it can be used for the beneficiaries of that trust, the hapu of Ngāti Tapu and Ngāti Mawhārau. And so this land, sir, has it's got a fascinating history. One of the submitters, Mr. Alistair Rees, brought, I thought, a very interesting perspective of the history of it. And if I could just read out some aspects of his submission. He said that the Church Missionary Society, which was founded in 1892, the CMS acquired the Te Papa Peninsula, including the land under consideration by this bill, for several reasons. Primarily as a location for their missionary endeavours, but also, in the words of Brown, that's Bishop Brown, to establish a land bank to mitigate the new Pākehā settlers' appetite for land, and as a symbol of CMS commitment to Māori. He said it seems necessary this is Brown speaking, in the present excited state of the people, to show them by this act that we have no present intention of leaving them. And so what he's conveying, that the purchase of this land, or the receiving of it, was in fact a sign of their long-term commitment. That's an interesting perspective. And also significantly that the land was received in order to land bank it, because of the appetite of settlers who were coming in to buy up parcels of land. So in order to protect it for the future benefit and use of the surrounding hapu. This view, as seen as an investment to be held in trust for Māori, was evidenced by the following statement by the Society's parent committee in London. In 1865, the Society stated that the Te Papa land had been, and quote, acquired and was retained under a solemn trust that it should be applied to the benefit of the Māori race and church, and that it should never be bartered or sold for the mere purpose of raising money. Those who gave the land for the benefit of themselves and their posterity would have just ground of complaint against us if we sold that land for a military settlement. And so we can see that there were altruistic motivations around the receiving of this land, yet there was dispute and disagreement around this, to the point, sir, where the tangata whenua never acknowledged or agreed or came into any sense of acceptance that this land was sold. And so it would be seen that this land was received to be held in trust. The submitter that we heard, Mr. Rees, also in his submission, wrote these words, which I believe are important to read out as well. He said, following the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, Archdeacon Brown, like many other missionaries, agonised over his split allegiances, as the following quote suggests. Prior to the land wars, he stated, "I am between the devil and the deep blue sea. In time, the government will require more land to steer clear of giving offence to the powers that be, i.e. the government, and that time, and at the same time sustain our character as guardians. We require much of the wisdom that cometh from above." Similarly to other CMS missionaries, Brown initially opposed the Crown response to Maori resistance over land sales in Taranaki and the government's subsequent confiscation policies. However, his position changed after the rise of the Kingitanga movement and the armed response by Waikato and Tauranga Hapu to Gray's invasion of the Waikato. This is a very interesting analysis of history. Brown viewed this as a rebellion against the divine and sovereign authority of Queen Victoria and her delegated representatives. So we see that the wheels are falling off what's happening here in Tauranga when all sorts of different perspectives and views are now being taken and changing, in a sense, what was an altruistic and perhaps noble position, it could be described as, to be a guardian and a protector for local hapu and iwi. And so he saw that these responses by Waikato and Tauranga Hapu to Gray's invasion of the Waikato, they saw that as a rebellion against the divine and sovereign authority of Queen Victoria and her delegated representatives. So this major conflict of interest, or conflict of loyalties and allegiances, essentially taking place. And it goes on to say his subsequent allegiance to the Crown over and against his parishioners in Tauranga and Moana, because this is what was happening, he was now shifting his allegiances, were considered a betrayal by many Maori. This betrayal was epitomised for Tangata Whenua when Brown hosted a dinner and the Eucharist with government officers at the Te Papa mission station the night before the Battle of Gate in 1864, and something which we've commemorated just this last week, as the member Tuaroa Flavel has highlighted. And he finishes by saying, perhaps the resultant estrangement between Brown and the local Maori is best encapsulated by a Bay of Plenty Times report on his death in 1884. And it is noted in the account of his funeral that there was but a poor attendance of members of Maori to which he had devoted his life. And this, I think, is a story of not just conflict external, but conflict internal, that we can see the human aspects of this story and what's taken place, where something which was intended for good became an issue of disenfranchisement for local hapu, because what happened was that the government came in and of that parcel of land took 4/5 of it and let the church retain 1/5 of it, and so disenfranchised the local hapu. So it moved from a caretaker, responsible, noble, beneficial situation to one where iwi were certainly disenfranchised from their land, which was far the original intention of Archdeacon Brown. Finally, to say, sir, that here we come now to this point in time in history where these matters are being resolved to the best of our ability as parliamentarians. And I have to say and acknowledge all the members of the Maori Affairs Select Committee for the collegiality and respect that we obviously show to one another to try and bring the best result possible for iwi in our nation, who have been aggrieved by history of the past. And let us hope, sir, that the history that we set these days is going to be of benefit to them. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member